Hello, and welcome to another episode of Refuge in Conversation with. I'm Becky, and today I'm going to be chatting with Martijn and Eva from the Coalition Against Stalkerware, and we will be focusing today on the topic of stalking and how technology is being misused to track and monitor survivors. A quick reminder, this episode will be discussing some really sensitive topics, including domestic abuse and stalking. If you're affected by any of our discussions, please know support is available. Contact the National Domestic Abuse Helpline on 0808 2000 247 from a trusted device. Refuge is part of the Coalition Against Stalkerware. We'll talk a bit more about that work in a moment, but first, Martijn, Eva, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
so
us.
much for having us.
To start off, do you want to tell us a bit about the Coalition Against Stalkerware and what you both do as part of that?
Okay, yeah, we can. I'll start, and Eva will follow. The coalition is a group of I think about 50 organizations from around the world, including organizations like Refuge that work directly or indirectly with domestic abuse survivors, but also many companies, organizations working in technology, including many cybersecurity companies. And the aim is ultimately to eradicate the problem of stalkerware, but in the short term, to provide support for survivors, provide information for journalists, for tech companies, and for anyone who in some capacity deals with stalkerware and to some extent with a wider issue of technology abuse.
I just wanted to follow up and say that one of our sort of big emphases at the Coalition Against Stalkerware is focusing on making stalkerware more detectable. Making it easier for people to know when they are being spied on, so that they can make a plan with an understanding of what their digital security and privacy situation is like, and also to pressure governments and law enforcement into doing a better job of creating consequences for using this kind of stalkerware in order to spy on people in domestic abuse situations. And finally, stalkerware exists in the sort of wider context of tech-enabled abuse. Spying on people's digital lives in a sort of domestic abuse situation doesn't just happen as a result of this software. There are a whole bunch of other ways in which to do it, and that includes account compromise and Bluetooth-enabled physical trackers as sort of two prominent examples. And so the Coalition Against Stalkerware also sort of deals with issues like that and tries to make it easier for people to know what's going on, and also make it harder for people to deploy these things in the first place.
That's great. It sounds like absolutely brilliant work from the coalition and great to have so many partner agencies working together towards that. I think it'd be worth going back to sort of talk a little bit about what stalking behaviour is and how modern day technology has changed that behaviour. If you're happy to talk to us about that.
Sure, I can start with sort of what is stalking. So, stalking is actually a very old form of abuse. It is simply the act of tracking what somebody is, sort of saying or doing or where they're going, without their consent, and it is a very common aspect of kind of domestic abuse situations. This can happen with or without the victim's knowledge, but the whole idea is that it is being done without their consent, either because their consent has been coerced, or because you are doing it secretly in order to circumvent consent. The big difference between the way that stalking worked a couple of decades ago and the way that stalking works now is that it is now much easier to track a person's location, what they're doing, what they're thinking, who they're talking to, because we lead so much of our lives online. And because of the ubiquity of smartphones. So we all carry tracking devices around in our pockets that can tell people where we are, who we're talking to, what we're doing. That can provide a fairly strong picture of what we're thinking and where we're going, and the that will even have all of our photos in there, all of our passwords in there. There's a lot of very sensitive information inside of your phone, and that makes it a really tempting target for abusers.
And I guess where I'd want to lead into from there is understanding what stalkerware is. When we refer to the Coalition Against Stalkerware and stalking behaviours, can either of you explain what stalkerware is to us?
Stalkerware refers to an app or a program that's installed on a device and that enables someone to secretly spy on another person's private life through details of their details from the device. It could be location, it could be content of messages, it could be phone logs that are shared with the stalker. So this allows an abuser to remotely monitor the whole device and therefore this person's information. And the main this happening secretly is crucial to our definition of stalkerware. There are legitimate reasons for tracking someone's location, for example. It might actually be a safety concern that someone deliberately shares their location if they're going to a potential unsafe environment. But stalkerware is installed secretly and doesn't make itself known to the device user.
Thanks, Martijn, for giving us insight into what stalkerware is. Some of our listeners may have heard of stalkerware in recent years, of celebrities or organisations being the target of attacks. Stalkerware, though, is a growing concern for women and girls and is a prevalent issue impacting many of the survivors we support at Refuge's Technology Facilitated Abuse team. What would you say is happening right now to try to combat stalkerware and raise awareness of the issue?
That's a good question. There are a number of things happening in parallel. Firstly, I should say that the use of stalkerware, like spying on someone's device without their permission, is in most jurisdictions would already be illegal, and you don't need special laws for that. But it's often hard to prove, and law enforcement might not have the skills or even the interest in working these cases. So that's something where I've seen some improvement. I've seen law enforcement agencies and officers being actively interested, like how can we help survivors better? How can we make our police forces, our local police forces, the first line responders, better at handling cases of stalkerware and more generally tech-enabled abuse. Then there is the development of stalkerware and the sale of stalkerware. There have been some recent developments, especially in the United States, where some stalkerware developers have been fined by, I think, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, that obviously removes an incentive for people to sell this, and I think that's a good thing. And then thirdly, there's awareness. I hope that the Coalition Against Stalkerware has contributed to that, to the raising awareness of stalkerware. That means that people know better, are more aware of stalkerware exists. And fourthly, and perhaps most importantly, it is people like Refuge, organizations like Refuge are aware of it and transfer this knowledge to the first line responders on the ground at domestic abuse shelters and sometimes local government support units. And people there being more aware and often having the network, sometimes to ask like a technical question when someone comes with a device problem. I've seen it make a huge difference in practice.
That knowledge and awareness is key in tackling stalkerware. At Refuge, we have developed training available to all of our frontline workers and provide training to external organisations like police forces and by and for led charities to improve responses and outcomes for survivors. Eva, you mentioned earlier on about the detection of stalkerware. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
All right, so there have been some very interesting developments in recent years in the detection of stalkerware. The first, I would like to give some credit to the Coalition Against Stalkerware for having made it easier for makers of antivirus products to work together to exchange information about what stalkerware looks like when it comes out onto the market and when it changes, in order to make it easier to detect stalkerware on your device, whether it is your laptop or your desktop machine or your tablet or your phone. And I think that that makes a really big difference. So we are seeing the sort of quality of detection has gone up. The other really interesting thing that has happened is that Apple added a security feature to their phone where you can do sort of a privacy check, which will show you everything that it will show you what data is being shared with what apps and what people from your account and from your phone. This is particularly important because it is one of the very few ways in which you can detect stalkerware on an iPhone, or stalkerware that is spying on somebody's Apple account. And the reason for that is that Apple has their sort of internal systems locked down so heavily, for your protection, that it is almost impossible for the makers of antivirus products to make antivirus apps that effectively find stalkerware on your phone. And so the security and privacy checks that Apple has added do a lot in order to make up for kind of that weakness in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I want to add to that because Eva mentioned detection by antivirus companies. It's not that antivirus companies didn't detect stalkerware or didn't detect it well, but historically they treated it as just another piece of malware, as a malicious app. And Eva deserves credit for that because she started that work. They these days more and more of them detect it as something special, as something different than, say, a malicious app targeting your banking details. Because you have such an app, can be seriously bad, but that's ultimately a device problem. If you have stalkerware on your phone, something that is installed on your phone without your knowledge, you have a problem in your life, and that requires a different way of handling it. In that case, you may want to call something like the Refuge helpline.
One of the things that a lot of people don't understand about stalkerware is that in order to install stalkerware, say on your phone, for most of the commercially available stalkerware, you need physical access to the device, and you need the sort of username and password you need to be able to unlock the phone. Or in the case of installing stalkerware that copies information from an Apple account, you would need the Apple ID and its password. And for a very long time, security companies didn't think that apps that needed to be installed this way needed to be treated as especially malicious. Because if you have physical access to the device and you have the username and the password, then surely you have legitimate access to the device. What could possibly go wrong? Truly, you are a good person. But that is exactly the opposite of the way in which abusive relationships work. It is extremely common for the abuser to have physical access to the device and to have the username and the password, often obtained through either trickery or some sort of coercion. And so convincing AV companies that not only was this malicious, but that it was a special kind of dangerous and malicious that goes sort of beyond the possibility that like somebody has installed a banking Trojan on your device was a bit of an uphill battle. But I think it's really one of the Coalition Against Stalkerware's kind of major victories.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and certainly a huge part of that awareness raising itself is trying to get other agencies to understand how these apps are working, how these apps are being misused. And finally, if someone's listening now as a survivor or somebody that supports survivors, what can they do if they have concerns for stalkerware?
That's a very good question. And the first thing I would say is install on your phone an antivirus app. And there's many of them. I would say go to the website of the Coalition Against Stalkerware, stopstalkerware.org, and look for one of the listed partners that are antivirus companies and download their apps. They're typically free, at least for a short period of time. See if it detects something. The second thing I would do, and that's not necessarily to detect stalkerware, but often when people suspect stalkerware, what actually happened is that, say, a partner or ex-partner has access to major accounts, like a Google account, a Facebook account. Check these accounts, Google, Facebook, etc. They all let you see who is logged in or from which places people have logged into the account. Check that. If there's anything you don't trust or that you're not entirely sure is you, log it out and change your password. And the third thing I would do, but that's slightly more technical, is go through, on an Android device, especially go through what is called a permissions manager and see which apps have access to suspicious permissions. You can actually, like, an app on an Android phone cannot see your location unless it has been granted permission. It can be done by you. It could also be done by someone who manually installed this. So if you can see which apps have access to your location. And you might find a weather app, which, it needs to know where you are, that's the location. You might find ride-hailing apps like Uber, which also, for obvious reasons, need access to your location. But you might find something suspicious there. Now, it probably won't say stalkerware. It might say a calculator. Well, if you see a calculator and the access to your permission, it's at least very suspicious. Sometimes these apps ask for all the permissions they can get for no good reason, but quite often this is something suspicious. In that case, really seek technical support. I don't know if Eve has anything to add here.
I have a few things to add. The first is I really wanted to underscore something that Martijn said, which is that you don't have to do this alone. Abuse is extremely stressful. And when you are a survivor of abuse, you may not have the extra mental bandwidth to become an information security professional. And I think expecting you to do so is unreasonable and cruel. So I do recommend finding a friend that you can trust who will sort of navigate these murky waters on your behalf. A place where you can point this friend in order to sort of start the process is EFF's Surveillance Self-Defense Guide, which you can find at ssd.eff.org. And it talks a lot about securing your accounts, and it talks about sort of what stalkerware is and how you might want to detect or get rid of that. And we have recently launched an entirely new section on Bluetooth-enabled trackers like AirTags, which are also a way in which we find that survivors of abuse are frequently being stalked.
Thanks, Martijn and Eva. That's really helpful and useful to know about. When supporting survivors with concerns about stalkerware, there aren't always symptoms, but often there will be some indicators such as rapid battery decline, significant interference on calls, and the phone glitching and behaving in unusual ways. The biggest indicator of stalkerware really is someone knowing more information than they should. So, as we've heard, there's some really useful resources and information out there for survivors and those supporting. And I would echo those comments and also encourage anyone with these concerns to make contact with the National Domestic Abuse Helpline from a safe and secure device. They can then refer for support from Refuge's Technology Facilitated Abuse team. Thank you, Martijn and Eva, for joining us today. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but this discussion around stalkerware and just how big of an issue it is for survivors has been brilliant. If you've been affected by any of the issues we've covered today, you can call the National Domestic Abuse Helpline on 0808 2000 247. from a device you think is safe. You can also live chat to a helpline advisor online, Monday to Friday from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. And if you need BSL services, we have interpreters available 10 till 6 Monday to Friday. For more information on tech abuse, visit refugetechsafety.org.